Hello everyone and welcome to another training video for the I.N.S.P.I.R.E project. Today we're tackling the topic of adapting facilitation to different sports disciplines. And let's start with a question. What do you think changes between facilitating a meeting and facilitating a sports training? By the end of this training session, we might find an answer to that. And also by the end of the session, you will be able to understand how facilitation principles vary across different sports, recognize the main tools we can adapt, things like language, gestures, rhythm, and feedback, and start designing inclusive facilitation strategies for your own sports environments. So, why do we need to adapt facilitation in the first place? Every sport has its own rhythm, its own structure, and sensory environment. Inclusion begins with observing this environment, the space, the time, the sport's energy, and the attention. The facilitator's job is to translate universal principles into sport-specific actions. One of the most important ideas here is that facilitation means adapting the environment and not the person. A child shouldn't have to change to fit the sport. Instead, the sport should open up to include the child. So facilitation is dynamic. A good facilitator adjusts and adapts constantly depending on the group's composition, its physical and emotional energy, the diversity of sensory and cognitive needs within the group, and the specific goals of that moment. Now let's talk a bit about the roles of a facilitator. They are an observer, noticing group signals. They're also a translator who turns ideas into actions that make sense on the field or in training. They're a connector, building trust and engagement. And they are a regulator, adjusting rhythm, tone, and intensity. If we compare general facilitation to facilitation in a sports context, we can see where the differences lie. Elsewhere, facilitation might mean managing a dialogue, while in sports it means managing energy. Visual facilitation becomes body demonstration. Building trust becomes encouraging cooperation, and emotional awareness translates into managing frustration and excitement. To do this well, facilitators rely on this set of adaptable tools that work across sports. The first is language, which should be clear, positive, and action oriented. For example, saying run to the red cone gives focus, while just yelling move faster creates pressure. The second one is gestures and visual aids. So bodies, colors, and symbols can all support concentration. For example, using visual routines, coded gestures, or pictograms. Next up is rhythm and timing. Predictability builds safety. So keeping consistent timing, clear transitions, and visible cues for starting or stopping an activity helps athletes feel grounded. Then there's feedback and reflection. The feedback should be short, concrete, and encouraging. For instance, asking what worked well instead of asking what went wrong. And finally, emotional presence. A calm voice leads a calm group. So your tone shapes the emotional climate of the session. Each of these tools does something distinct. Language creates structure and clarity, therefore, you should use short, concrete sentences to get your ideas across. Gestures support concentration, so combining words with body movement. Rhythm maintains flow and safety. Feedback encourages learning, so your criticism should always be positive and constructive. And finally, tone regulates the group's energy. Now let's look at how these tools play out in different sports with practical examples. In football, gestures and rhythm are key, for example, using consistent visual clues to coordinate passing. In swimming, visual aids matter the most, so things like pictograms, plays near the pool. In gymnastics, tone and rhythm are crucial, so a calm and steady voice helps athletes center themselves before routines. And in basketball, feedback has a key importance. So short, positive reinforcement after each play keeps motivation high. And finally, in Paralympic bocce, language and timing are the most important. So slow visual instructions with pauses will make sure that everyone can participate comfortably. Now, when we talk about adapting for inclusion, the goal is to use multisensory channels and to create predictable structures to promote peer cooperation. We should strive to adapt communication and space and not the person, because inclusion doesn't mean doing something different. It means making space for everyone. And before we close, let's take a moment to reflect. Which facilitation tool comes most naturally to you? Which one challenges you the most? And how does the rhythm of your sport influence the way you facilitate? And to wrap up, here are the key takeaways. So, adaptation is at the heart of facilitation. Every sport has its own rhythm and its own voice. And finally, inclusion grows from observation and creativity, because the best facilitator adapts their tools and not the people. For your next session, try noticing which of these tools you use the most often. That might just be your unique facilitation signature. Thank you for your attention.